Hi, I'm Melissa.
And I'm Ammiel.
We love video games and movies, and we love talking about them.
So we are hosting a new podcast where every week we choose one video game and one movie to talk about.
We will go through each click and flick from beginning to end and talk about what we like and don't like. And then we will give you a rating based completely on our own opinions and nothing else. Ciao. Hello. Welcome back.
Here we are, flicking and clicking.
Flicking and clicking.
Clicking and flicking.
Flicking and clicking and flicking. Yes.
Another episode.
What episode are we on now? 5?
I think it's 4.
4?
Mm-hmm.
I think you're right.
Mm-hmm. But I'm excited for this episode. This episode we both picked, I think unknowingly, kind of like mind trippy things that kind of connected, but not, I mean.
They're very similar in the aspect of your mind being in a looping roller coaster.
They're both about time.
Yes.
Really.
Yes.
So I think we start with the flick this time.
I'm ready.
So I'm excited.
I'm so ready.
I want to start with this quote from the movie.
Okay. Ooh.
People like to think of themselves as points moving through time, but I think it's probably the opposite. We're stationary and time passes through us. So that is from I'm Thinking of Ending Things, which came out on Netflix. I think it came out 2020.
I think you're right.
So it came out last year. What did you think of it?
My initial thought when I saw the beginning of the movie, I was enamored. I was like, I love the way this is shot. It's beautiful. It's it also starts with her kind of inner monologuing, which immediately I'm a fan of. And so I was instantly excited, and I was also really off-put by the scene they chose to start with. So I was very I was in this weird limbo of ooh, I like this, and then I was like, wait, what's going on here? So that was my initial thought.
So the movie starts out with the narrator, the main character, Lucy, is getting ready to go visit her boyfriend's parents to meet them for the first time on his farmhouse.
Right.
So it's the first trip to the family farm, and she is already thinking of ending things. So she's contemplating just not being with him.
Did they ever give a timeline of how long they had been dating?
Okay, so that's when things are... I feel like the stories change a lot in this movie.
Okay. Okay. Just making sure.
At one point they say this was 6 weeks ago. She says that they met 6 weeks ago in her head. But I think that as we get into the movie, we see that we can't really be sure of that or of anything, right?
Right.
So I'm just kind of going to go through the movie kind of shot by shot as best I can. Because I feel like that's the only way to explain this movie.
100%. There's a lot of minute details that need to be explained.
So a lot of these things are thoughts in her head that she'll be thinking of something, and a lot of times Jake will interrupt her as if he could hear her thoughts, which is interesting, right?
Yes.
And there is the first time this kind of happens that we think that he can hear her thoughts is when she first gets in the car, and her thought is, I'm thinking of ending things. And he says, what did you say? Did I say something? Oh, I thought I heard something.
Yeah.
Right? So we're already this is a little bit weird. It's not quite as straightforward as what we think is going to happen, right? So the thing is that cutting between the car and the house on the farm, we see an old man on the farmhouse, and he's just getting ready for work, getting in his car, doing his morning routine. And we keep cutting back and forth to the old man in the house and the couple driving to the parents' house. So the boyfriend, so Jake is explaining to Lucy how the mother's not doing well. And then he just gets like really agitated when anytime that he gives her a detail, she kind of questions it. And then he gets upset and like agitated about it. Like he just wants things to be a certain way, and he doesn't want her to question anything or to bring up any details.
Right. I almost get the vibe too that he's embarrassed.
Yes.
Especially initially.
Then she gets a call in the car, and the person calling her says Lucy, which is her,
like the incoming call,
which was her name, which is what he already called her. So he asks, "Who is it?" And she says, "Oh, it's just a friend."
It's a
and she
friend,
doesn't answer it, right?
Right.
So then she says for the first time that she's worried about getting home on time. She has work in the morning, so she has to be at home tonight.
And it's snowing heavily. Well, kind of.
What she has to be home in the morning to do for work also changes throughout the movie. It cuts back to the old man who was on the farmhouse. He gets to work, and we find out he's the custodian at the high school. We cut back to the car, and they turn on music, and it starts playing the song from Oklahoma, "Many a New Day Will Please My Eyes."
Yes. And he's so shocked that she doesn't know it's from Oklahoma. He's like, "Oh my God, like it's from Oklahoma."
And then she's like, "Oh, you like musical theater?" This. He goes, "Well, I know a few shows," and literally lists off like 25 shows.
Yeah.
Which are all...
You get a very panicked feeling when he's talking about it too.
And it's all like repetitive and just uncomfortable. The way this movie is shot is very slow, very drawn out. It's a really long movie, and so this kind of like listing is just kind of like, it's kind of like your mind trailing off, and he's just listing off musicals. So I feel like your mind trailing off is a lot of this movie. It's like, it's just like that pacing of just like so slow and not really knowing where you're going.
Right.
So...
Because all you know right now is that she's going to meet the parents, but it's a trailing like build up.
So it cuts back and forth, him explaining how he knows the song from Oklahoma is because he did it when he went to high school, and the high school does it every year.
Oh my God, doing Oklahoma every year.
Or not every year, but it's like, he says it's one of the shows they do more often. Throughout the years because they live in like a farm town. But all of the musicals he's listing are basically the shows that the theater department does at the high school or has done over the years, I guess in his lifetime. Not just in the 4 years he was in high school. He listed many.
Right.
Then he asks her to recite a poem that she wrote. This is interesting because she wrote this poem, and one of the lines says coming home to a wife, or an emptiness of a wife. However, from her perspective, she wouldn't be coming home to a wife. So it seems like the poem is written from a male perspective. It's doesn't sound like a woman wrote it.
Right. And he doesn't comment about it. But
he says, it sounds like you wrote...
He said about me.
He says, it sounds like you wrote it about me. And she was like, well, that's what I hope for, is that anybody can like relate to my poetry. And he goes, it sounds like you wrote it about me. And she's like, rolls her eyes, whatever. He doesn't get it. they get into a lot of arguments, like philosophical arguments in the car. And I don't want to go over each one that they talk about, but they go over movies and they talk about life and how whether or not anything that's living wants to live. And he gets very upset with her because she's very contrarian to his opinions.
Right.
So they get to the farmhouse and he doesn't go inside right away. He waves to his mom from the window for like an awkward amount of time. Way too long.
Yes.
And like I said,
Yes.
everything in this movie is slow and drawn out and just it's like your mind wandering through the movie.
And it's hard because it's like the portrayal he already had set for his mom and then seeing her in the window. For me, that's when my brain started
Which
to, yeah, where it gives you time to think about it, but you're like, what are the possibilities? What's happening? Because he's so expressive on his face that even his words aren't enough. You have to see his face to like grasp it.
So he goes straight to the barn and he goes and they go and see sheep. And he's kind of aggressive about her asking questions about the sheep again, like, oh, what's going to happen? And he's like, you're not doing what I want you to do, which is following me to the pig pen, which is where he was like showing her how the pigs had to be put down because he found maggots eating their stomach while they were still alive.
Because they wouldn't move out of this spot. It was a dark spot in the barn. And you could tell that there was something there. Yeah, the
He
way he
said that
described it was really gruesome.
they were laying down for a few days and they were going and feeding them, but they weren't really getting up. And so finally they went to move them and they were so heavy because they're hogs. And once the dad was finally able to move them, he found that they had been being eaten alive by maggots. And so that was a really traumatic experience for Jake in his childhood. So they go in the house and Jake offers her slippers because of the cold floors. She says no, of course not, you keep them. And it cuts back to the high school with the custodian, and he's going through the halls, and you see that they are practicing a current production of Oklahoma. So these two things kind of shadow each other throughout the movie.
Right.
Which is really interesting when it leads up to the finale. So
Absolutely. Yes.
she starts looking. So they're sitting in the family room. Parents are upstairs. They're waiting for them to come down. And she sees a door with scratches on it.
Jake was also frantically like searching for his parents too. He like runs upstairs and is like, hello, like almost like nobody was there and he was afraid that
like it was an empty house.
Like almost like he was in my yeah, and like he was expecting nobody to be here.
Like
and that
like
was
he didn't want
so
to hear someone respond.
To me.
Like he was calling out to make sure it was empty is what it sounded like. Yes, which is weird.
Right. And then eventually his dad's like, we're coming down. I don't know why that off put me so bad, but I'll tell you about it at the end.
She sits down in the family room. And what's interesting is that she says, this reminds me of the house I grew up in. And he says all farmhouses are kind of look alike, right? But then she notices the scratched door with tape on it. And he says that goes to the basement. And he says, I hate the basement. And she was like, well, I want to go down and see it because I didn't have a basement growing up in an apartment. Which is, again, so we're seeing things that we can't be sure of now.
Because she said, this reminds me of my old house.
She grew up in a farmhouse or she grew up in an apartment, right? These details of the past will continue to change, right? So she like pretends to try to get down in the basement, and he like is really uncomfortable, right? He doesn't want
pushes
her
him.
to even joke about it.
Yeah.
But then the dog comes in, so she goes and starts petting the dog, Jimmy. Favorite character.
Yeah. Yeah, Jimmy.
So the parents
Yep.
come downstairs, and Jake's dad just doesn't acknowledge him or like look at him in the eye at all in the first scene.
Yeah, he's like turned sideways, looking to the left. Jake is right in front of him, and he refuses because his wife's to the left, and then Lucy's also to the left, and he just doesn't even pay attention to.
Yeah, he doesn't look at him at all.
Oh, yes. Sorry, continue.
And
Oh,
they sit down to dinner, and the mom says everything is from right here on the farm, and the main dish is just like a ham, just a big pig belly.
yeah.
So
Hunkin' ham.
that's
Yeah.
very uncomfortable, but nothing gets like, she doesn't say anything about it. She eats the food, whatever. And they talk about painting. So now, even though in the car she was a poet, now she's at the dinner table. She's
Right.
a painter. And Jake, all through the dinner, is just very silent and closed off and just. Yes.
He stares
and
at his mom a lot.
It's like when someone's
Uncomfortably.
in that place where you can tell that they're just one thing away from blowing up. Like, you're just walking on eggshells around them.
Yes.
He was
yes.
like at that level where it was like just one thing would send him over the edge.
But he never did.
It was like
Right?
it was like his way of life was
Yeah.
that state.
Yeah.
He did at some point. He would like bang on the table once, like, but it would always come back to like,
Real quick, yeah.
I'm sorry, I said to stop, or, you know.
Right. It never fully released.
So he has her start showing her paintings to the parents from her phone, but when she pulls out her phone, she has all these missed calls from. There were some from Lucy
some from
Louisa,
Lucy and then Louisa.
which Louisa is the name from Sound of Music. So that's another musical
Yeah.
reference.
And the dad the whole time was questioning. He couldn't grasp the concept of painting if there was no person in the painting. So he was so taken aback. He's like, how can you feel an emotion from a painting if there's not a human in the painting expressing that feeling? So she's like, okay, well, like, I'll show you. Oh, I found that really interesting.
So the mom doesn't look at the paintings at all while she's showing them. The mom is staring right at her. And the dad is just very
Right.
critical, like, well, I can't
Yep.
tell if I'm supposed to be sad unless there's
Right.
someone in the painting looking sad.
I guess he's not wrong.
So then they change the subject. She starts telling the story about how they met. And then she says they met at a trivia night. So this is the first time that she explains. Right. This is the first variation story of how they met. And it's a trivia night.
Okay.
And they say that she met at a bar. And he came up and they were talking about something. And then she said, so after a little bit, I finally went up and talked to him because it was clear he wasn't going to say anything to me. And the dad goes, wait, I thought you just said you guys were talking. And so then she's like,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
you're right. And she starts questioning her own memory.
Uh-huh.
And she goes, that's when she mentions that it happened 6 weeks ago. And she drinks one whole glass of wine in one sip. And then it...
See, I missed that minor detail, by the way. I missed that. The wine, the drinking wine.
But it's just one glass. So we only see her drink one glass of wine, and she just drinks it down really fast. While Lucy is in the room looking at pictures, in the family room, she notices a picture of her when she was a little girl. And she says, who is that? And he says, "Can't you tell?"
Mm-hmm.
And she goes, "No." And he goes, "It's me." And then it cuts back, and it's the same child, but it's a little boy. It's the same haircut, same outfit and everything, but instead of it being a little girl, it's a little boy and it's him. And she's like, "Huh."
Mm-hmm. I missed that detail as well.
Yes. So
I didn't
that's
realize that.
later on in the house, the friend calls again. She gets another call and she listens to the voicemail this time. And it's a really weird voicemail.
Oh, that's right.
It says, "There's only one
Mm-hmm.
question to resolve. I'm scared. I feel a little crazy. I'm not lucid. The assumptions are right. I can feel my fear growing. Now is the time for the answer. Just one question to answer."
Yeah, and it ends.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a husky man's voice. It's not Jake's voice. It's not his dad's voice.
It could be the custodian.
Yep.
So Lucy goes and looks out the window and it's snowing. And she's like, "Okay, we gotta go."
Harder.
And then she turns around and the house is empty suddenly. Even though everyone was just sitting there talking. She turns around and the house is empty. And she hears Jake calling from upstairs. So she goes up to Jake's room. And she doesn't see him. It's his childhood room, but she picks up a book of poems. And she starts reading the poem that she wrote in the car, that she was reciting in the car.
There's also a shot of Jimmy, the dog's urn, in his bookshelf. And I lost it. I was like, what?
Oh my gosh. My heart just
Because
sank.
there's minute details. Yeah. There was like a trike, a yellow trike, a single, like a child's bed. Because those are important details for the end.
There's also a DVD of A Beautiful Mind, which is interesting when we get to the end again. Then the dad comes in the room, and he is significantly older now. Now he is like much older, probably like 30 years older. She leaves she leaves Jake's room and goes into the parents' bedroom where the mom is now just in her like last days, and Jake is feeding her just mush. And right.
Yeah, and
she's
refusing
Lucy's like,
to
"Can we
eat."
go, please? We need to go. I need to get home. I need to be home tonight." And he is again getting upset because it's not going along with his timeline, with what he wants to be doing. And he's saying,
He says, "Don't worry, we're gonna go."
right. And Jake is saying, "I'm trying to feed my mom.
Yeah.
We'll go soon." And Lucy's like, "Okay." In her thoughts, I should just leave him. I should just cut it clean. I should just, we'll never have to talk again. I don't need to wait for things to get better. And she starts walking downstairs, but it's just the shot of the stairs. And she keeps coming down again and again and again.
Over and over. But she's in an inner monologue this whole time.
Her inner monologue doesn't stop. And there's no pause. She just keeps talking to herself. And she ends at the bottom of the stairs, but then she's at the top again and comes down again. And then she's at the top again and comes down again. Just repeating the same thing over and over again. And when she finally gets to the bottom, she's like, "Okay, Jake, we have to go." And Jake is now with his elderly father, helping him at the bottom of the stairs. And she says, "I have a shift in the morning." And Jake says, "Oh, she's a waitress. She was a poet, and she was an artist, and she was a physicist, and now she is a waitress."
A waitress.
And then the mom comes in, all decked out in 50s housewife, mother, like, Leave It to Beaver mom.
Yeah.
And she gives her
Yep.
a nightgown to take down to the basement and put in the washing machine.
Is it still the same scene? Because I think that 50 scene only happened once, right?
Yes.
Because in that scene, she explains that Jake doesn't like things not going his way. But she's like, "I'd much rather not fight against it. I just kind of go with it because fighting against it makes it worse." So she just, like, at this point, he must have been a
And
toddler, like
she
4,
says,
maybe
well, I
5.
don't know if she's talking about him at the age that he was when she is that age, because she says, oh, this has his baby food on it. So when she's that in that age, he's not old enough to digest solids. But I think that,
Okay,
but
because
her
you,
referring to that, oh, Jake just blah, 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 I think that that is referring to him in his whole life, because remember, time is all of it.
I see, I see. Yeah, she had just made that comment, and it was crucial at that point to understand why he was being the way he was being. Okay, continue, sorry.
So she goes down to the basement to start washing the nightgown,
Mm-hmm.
and she's pulls as she's pulling out clothes from the washer, they're all custodian uniforms. Everything is the custodian's uniform in the
Yeah.
washer. And she looks
Mm-hmm.
over and she sees all of Jake's paintings. And
Mm-hmm.
she notices all the work looks a lot like hers.
The one she was showing on her phone to the dad.
But when she looks back on her phone to see her pictures again, she has no pictures on her
Yeah,
phone.
they're gone.
Going back upstairs, now mom is in her
Mm-hmm.
final days. She's laying in a hospital bed. She looks, right,
She
she
looks
looks
dead.
dead. Jay keeps
Yeah.
saying she's
Yeah.
sleeping, but her eyes are open and she's not breathing.
Right.
And the dad comes in, and he's younger now than he's ever been. He's like a 30-year-old dad walking in with a wrench, and he's like, oh, I'm just working on the disposal. And then they
Mm-hmm.
say goodbye, they put the chains on their car, and they finally start the drive home, which is only halfway through the movie.
It's wild to think
And at
that.
this
It's
point, I really
crazy.
thought, wow, I'm only halfway through the movie. Jesus. So,
Yeah. Up until now, so I guess I can say this now, get it out of the way, because this entire up until now, I was going through an episode, I don't know what it was, but I was really anxious. I was really
mm-hmm.
fighting with reality right then and there. I had an episode where I felt like it was like dizzy, and I couldn't really like keep my eyes straight. It was weird.
I feel like this movie pulls that out of you. I couldn't watch it all in one sitting. I had to like watch
Oh,
it in three separate
it made
chunks.
yeah, I was not, I mean, it didn't help that I was freaking out before the movie, and then when I started it, it exacerbated everything. I was like tripping balls. I was so out of my head watching this movie because I was struggling with my own reality, and then for there to be a movie inhibiting that. Oh. So I was struggling. I was capturing every moment, but I was also fighting the fact of feeling like I was Lucy and that I was just not lucid, basically. It was so weird. So weird. So after this point, it got better because I was able to kind of like focus in on my mental state, but whoa.
So they're finally driving home, and in the car, they start talking about, oh, that was a successful visit, Jake says.
Yeah, what'd you think of them? Oh, they were nice.
Right.
Yeah.
And Jake, but then Lucy starts questioning the events of the night when Jake says, oh, you and Dad were talking about this. I helped my mom do dishes. She goes, I don't remember you helping your mom do dishes.
Oh, yes.
And Jake says, well, you drank like 6 glasses of wine. You kept drinking wine. And she was like, I don't remember that
Yeah.
either. So she's just questioning the events. And this is where she says the quote, people like to think of themselves as points moving through time. But she's
Yeah.
experiencing time all passing through her, which was everything kind of
Right.
in that house, which is why everything's happening at different times. Then they start arguing about a movie. The movie was called A Woman Under the Influence. And he says that he likes the movie. And she, of course, says she disagrees. And then she goes into
Right.
a speech that is verbatim a 1974 review of that movie. And she, like, her character switches and she starts doing almost an impersonation of the author. And this is a
Yeah.
real live
Yep.
movie review written about this movie, and she's reciting it word for word, doing an impression of the author as if it was like,
Her.
her reading it
Yeah.
to him.
Right. Her
Hmm.
own words, kind of thing.
And then he
Yeah.
starts having a crisis again because he cannot handle someone disagreeing with him.
Yeah.
And then they start talking about his mother again because he's upset that she said, while they were talking about Tulsi Town, something about sweet and cold, and she said, like your mother. And he didn't like that, did
Oh
not take that well at
God.
all, and then started going through his own head about Sigmund Freud and how blaming everything on your mother and yada yada. And they argue about this as well. And one thing I do want to note about their arguments is that it's almost like arguing with yourself, where it's like your mind will always have a back and forth because whatever you can think of to,
Yep.
whatever excuse you can think of for something, you can think of a rebuttal in your own head. And so you're
Right.
preparing yourself.
Right.
It's as if like you're preparing your side of an argument, but then in your head you think, well, what are they going to say? And then you have to think of
Right.
a response to that thing. And it's like their conversations are all
Right.
that energy to me.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
So then they break the tension and decide to stop at Tulsi Town for some blizzards.
Shakes. Yeah. Like concrete.
Yeah. So this movie actually is based off a book. And in the book, they stop at a Dairy Queen. They just couldn't get the rights for Dairy Queen.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that.
Considering how many freaking references are in this movie to like everything, like books, art, poetry,
Right.
musicals.
Dairy Queen. Nope.
Dairy Queen said no.
One scene in the movie.
So they call it Tulsi Town.
For real.
And it's basically a Dairy Queen. So they go and they get blizzards, these like huge blizzards.
Yeah.
And the girls who work there are these two like blonde, like typical high school mean girls. Like they are gossipy, fake flirty to make fun of you in a way. Like it seems like to like specifically to him. He doesn't even want to go up to the window because he says that they'll know it's him.
Yes. Not genuine.
Which means that they're girls in high school, probably girls he went to high school with. And then the third
Right.
girl is like brunette.
Yeah. Yeah.
And not pretty. And she has like a rash on her arm. And she says to Lucy, the smell is varnish. And then she makes her blizzards and gives them to her and says, actually, it's not varnish. I'm worried. I'm worried for you. And she says, you don't have to keep going forward in time, which is so weird. And she goes, whoa.
It was a pinnacle point in the movie for sure.
And Lucy gets back in the car and she thinks this will be the last time I'm in a car with him.
Yeah.
Then they're driving. They keep getting into arguments, in your own head arguments. And he says, I want to throw away these blizzards because I keep calling them blizzards. Dairy Queen's gonna come after me.
They are. They're blizzards.
So he keeps looking at the ice cream and goes, oh, we have to dump these. They're gonna melt. And she's like, I just want to go home. What are you talking about? We're not gonna stop and just to throw these away. We'll just, whatever. And he's like, no, I know how to,
Right.
there's a narrow road up ahead. We'll just go down and we'll find a place to throw these away. And she's like, are you kidding me? I just want to get home. It's snowing. It's blizzardy. It's late at night.
At this point, I have severe anxiety
Me
because
too.
I don't know. I I feel like I speak for most people when I say that there's not been one point in time in your life where you've been homesick. There has to have been numerous, well, at least for me, there's been numerous points in time in my life where homesickness has been debilitating. And it's made me who I am today now because oddly enough, I have to know
Mm.
where I'm at all times because I know where
Mm-hmm.
north, south, east, west, I know it all. I know where I'm at all the time. And so having her go through this, even in the beginning when they were in the car, I was taking note of what street they were
Yeah.
on, like what
Mm-hmm.
landmarks they were passing. So at this point, when she started to just like push the subject, I was like, she needs to get home. Something needs to give because I'm freaking out. And that at that point in the movie, it overcome me for sure.
And her being in this position, like in the passenger seat with an
Mm-hmm.
angry partner behind the wheel,
Yep.
it's scary. I've been in that
Yep.
position before where you don't know where they're driving you. They're just mad at you
It's terrifying.
and you're
Yep.
getting farther and
Yep.
farther into isolation away from civilization.
Yeah.
It's a very
Isolation.
scary
Yep.
situation.
Oh. Oh. Giving me chills thinking about it.
So they turn down this road and he's like, we'll just go really fast and we'll turn back around. The high school is down here. And
Yeah.
she again says, this is a really narrow road. How do buses get down this road? And he says, it's a rural high school. So she's questioning him again and he again doesn't like it. It's a rural high school. And she goes, I grew up on a farm.
Mm-hmm.
I went to a rural high school. My high school had paved streets.
Yeah.
And so was an apartment or was a farm? A farm,
Yeah.
right? Again, so it went back,
Yeah.
switched back and forth. So they get to the old high school and he starts explaining, oh yeah, it has this many classrooms, this many lockers, this many bathrooms, this many offices. But she goes, wow, you really know your old high school. And he says, like the back of my hand. And she looks down
Yeah.
at his hand. It's an old man. Old man's hand.
Old man's hand.
And so he goes, throws away the blizzards, comes back into the car, and doesn't turn on the car. Oh, it's so that part is so frustrating to me. I'm like, once you get back in, you just turn on and go. But he like sat there and was talking to her like,
You're right.
and then he starts quoting song Baby It's Cold Outside,
Mm.
and then they get into an argument about that, about being a song about coercion, and then he
Mm-hmm.
goes, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, babe. Let's kiss.
Yeah.
So disgusting. Because
I
you
know.
don't take
I
responsibility
know.
for anything. You're just like, oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Here, make me feel good, right?
Right. Right. They're like, I'm hurting. You're not hurting. I am.
Here, I'm sorry that I hurt you. Now you can make me feel good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Then he says someone's watching us, the janitor. And he has like a flashback of it. And he goes, someone's watching us. And he gets really angry. And he goes and leaves her in the car.
And the flash is so quick. It's just what I'm presuming. I don't remember if it's Jake or not. You do see the person. I don't. I just don't remember.
It is the custodian.
But he's looking through a hole. It is the custodian. Okay. So he's looking through a hole at something. You don't know what's on the other side. You just see the hole and him. And it's so quick. It's just like bada bing and
And
nothing
he's like,
else
someone's
after that.
watching. And he leaves her in the car. And then she's alone with her thoughts. And she starts thinking, it's hard to say no. Why did I even say yes? He kept on bugging me. And she
Right.
ends up like
Right.
falling asleep in the car and waking up. And it's freezing cold. Jake's not back yet. And she's like, are you kidding? What the heck? And she gets out of the car and yells his name.
Yeah.
But she closes the door. And then the door's locked. And now she can't get back in the car. So she goes into the high school and runs into the janitor, where he says that he didn't see anyone else, but he offers her his slippers.
The same slippers
The same slippers that
that
Jake
Jake
offered her.
offered.
And she says, no, of course not. She keeps going and she sees Jake in the hall. And when she sees Jake, then their body doubles come out and they go into the Oklahoma ballet dream sequence.
Oh, it was so beautiful.
But it is in that.
It's their own, like.
Obviously, they're referencing Oklahoma, the musical, and the ballet dream sequence. And they end theirs with a ballet dream sequence of Jake and Lucy dancing through the halls. Then they have a wedding, but the janitor comes and they end up fighting, and they end up back in the gym where it's snowing, and the custodian ends up stabbing Jake. It's all dance, ballet, interpretive, and Jake pulls out red ribbon to signify blood. Very Saul Block tango.
Yes.
Then it cuts to the custodian finishing cleaning. Now back to the real them. So the dancers have...
Yeah.
Once the dancers are gone, the real actors come back in and then they leave. And the real custodian is there finishing up. And then he goes and sits in his truck where he experiences some kind of physical attack. And he starts getting flashbacks and hot flashes where we see his flashbacks are of his parents fighting. Jake's parents. His flashbacks are of him, Jake, when he was a child. And he starts seeing the Tulsi Town ad from his childhood start playing in the window of his car. And then an animated pig with maggots coming out of his stomach that he saw when he was a kid comes out and says, "Join me." And he follows him. And he gets out of his truck, butt-ass naked.
Butt naked.
And walks through
butt-ass naked.
the halls of the high school to an assembly where old Jake is giving a speech. Now, this is not the real old Jake, who's the custodian, but this is young Jake, who is in stage makeup, old age stage makeup, which is, if you've ever seen like theatrical makeup up close, for anyone who hasn't been involved in theater, you can look up pictures of it, but it's very over the top, very dramatic, very exaggerated. The lines are just like thick, dark contour lines, limited blending.
Yes. Just to create harsh lines,
It looks scary up close, even though it looks from far away on a stage. It makes it...
It does,
You can tell that it's a old person.
Right.
So everyone is wearing this very exaggerated old age stage makeup.
In the audience.
And in the audience, everyone. And everyone in the audience were the high school kids in this makeup, except the parents, the girls who worked at the Tulsi Town, and Lucy is there.
Lucy's there, but in the old stage makeup.
Yep, everybody. Parents are in the old age stage makeup. Tulsi Town workers, everyone in the audience, everyone is in the old age stage makeup. So he then performs the speech. His speech at the end of this movie is the same speech that's at the end of A Beautiful Mind. Then he goes and the set is wheeled out that looks like his childhood bedroom, but it's on Judd's little hut from Oklahoma. And inside of Judd's little hut is Jake's childhood bedroom.
Yes.
Where he sings Lonely Room from Oklahoma and then gets a standing ovation. And this is the last scene of the movie. And then it cuts to outside of the school the next morning where it's just Jake's truck there. Jake, the custodian, old man custodian, Jake's truck there, just covered in snow because he is inside of it, passed on. And that is, I'm thinking of ending things. So, it's a lot. Just to explain that movie.
It's a lot, yeah.
It's a lot. So here is what is interesting about this movie is that Lucy is not real.
Right. Right.
She's the narrator, but she's just
A figment.
a figment of Jake's imagination. And this is why so many details would change, because in his mind, oh, this girl I met when she was a waitress.
Yep.
Oh, this girl I met at a trivia bar night.
Yep.
When I take her home to meet my parents, what age are my parents?
Right. Right. And to me, following through with that, because again, I'm not to degrade myself, but I simply watch for the experience. I try to watch and understand, but there were so many possibilities in my brain that, yes, obviously Jake was the custodian, but like there were so many different routes that I was thinking
Mm-hmm.
of the ending of that movie and what the significance of
Mm-hmm.
certain things were, like Jimmy's urn and like the dog never shaking. It's like he glitched out or never like returning back to normal. Every time you
Mm-hmm.
see Jimmy, he was shaking the wet off of his fur. And
Mm-hmm.
just small nuances like that encapsulated my mind. So I
Yes.
was constantly focused on smaller stuff
It's just
than the whole
like,
picture.
it's like the whole movie is just him
Yeah.
on the last day of his life thinking and imagining about all of these things that
Yeah.
could have, would have, did happen maybe.
Yep. And I think
And
thinking the worst, like obviously from your perspective, if you're seeing your life flash through you like a movie, there are a lot of good parts, but you are definitely going to remember the bad parts and the hard parts and the worst parts. And so
mm-hmm.
to me that had significance as well because you remember your parents as they age, you're seeing like the change in them, their their
Mm-hmm.
craziness, their in what's the word I'm looking for? Their not incompatibility, but like the just the small nuances that got under your skin. It was like all of that
Right. Every
stuff.
like pet peeve, every like
Yeah.
way they push your buttons.
And it at the end I felt I mean, I have strange remorse for old people, but I was so heartbroken for Jake's character.
Hmm.
I was so besides the peeping Tom thing, I was just so sad that the old man died. I and that's what he remembered of
I
his life. That's kind of how I saw it.
I think that he's a bad guy.
I think so too. I think I absolutely, absolutely. But the fact that because at the until I clarified it was Jake, which
Mm-hmm.
again didn't happen until the end.
Right. We
My
don't know that until the end,
right, right.
obviously.
So my heart was shattered for this old man who was suffering alone in a snowy rural high school. I was so messed up over it. But you're right. Like, I genuinely think
But
he's a bad guy.
knowing how he is as a young man,
Oh, right, right.
he was aggressive, he was controlling, he was
Manipulative in a terrible way.
what's I want to say like ununderstanding, but would that just be standing?
He was just standing. That's it. Yeah, he had just.
But
Yeah.
obviously his parents had mental issues they didn't know how to control or
Right,
take care
right.
of,
It projected.
and they were
Yep.
passed down to him. So I do want to say that something I thought was really cute, the end speech where he's quoting A Beautiful Mind. In order to use that speech from A Beautiful Mind in their movie, this is what Charlie Kaufman said. I have never spoken to Ron Howard in my life. I assume they got permission. So, hopefully they didn't get in too much trouble for taking
I mean, it's on
those
Netflix,
lines.
so
Yeah, they got permission. In the credits, it says they got permission.
yeah.
And the credits also, in the end credits, he credited all of the artists who did the oil paintings
Oh,
in
that's
the
good.
movie. I thought that this movie was really interesting concept.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I'm jaded and I can't like watch so many scenes where I was just like, this is literally, I'm just looking at this, imagining Charlie Kaufman watching it and thinking of how great of an artist he is, which makes me like, it makes me feel like it's less art. Even though it's not, and it shouldn't make me feel that way, but it's like, I can't help but think of how much he just, like, is jerking himself to his own movie.
Is tooting his own horn. No, and I get that.
But when you sit down and break it down, it is an interesting movie. It's an interesting plot line. And I feel like, is it just, like, me being too small to appreciate art? Me don't think so, but who knows?
Welcome to my world, because that's how I felt the whole time. I was like, am I just not intelligent enough to understand what the hell's going on?
Because really, I felt like a lot of this is just pretentious.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you. I agree with you. You're just kind of the whole time like, who wrote this? Well, because I wasn't aware of who did this. So I definitely had that thought once or twice throughout this movie.
Right.
So
and I did too, even though I did know who wrote this movie. Even I was like,
who wrote this?
Who wrote this? Or who allowed this?
Who allowed it?
But it was, I mean, the details are important to a movie, and I think they do. Obviously, this movie is good. So I am going to give it 7 flicks because
wow,
it's good. It's a good movie, and I can't just say it's a bad movie because it's pretentious.
Right.
Even though it is pretentious, if I say it's a bad movie because of that, it just makes me look stupid.
It's not true. It's your own,
I'm just kidding.
It's your extent of opinion. I get that.
I'm like, well, I don't understand the references.
7 flicks. Sorry. I don't have any better answer other than saying, you know what? Okay, here's what I'll do, because this is my opinion. I'm gonna give it 6 flicks. God, I will get it right. I swear, 6 flicks, because again, my pea-sized brain here, trying to keep up with the storyline, made it all that more interesting in the end for me to learn all the loose ends. For the most part, you have to kind of connect them together. Mm-hmm. But also, I don't necessarily feel like a movie has to make sense, but it has to make sense for me. And you understand that throughout the movie, that there's going to be flashbacks, there's going to be things that happen in the blink of an eye with no explanation. But in order for me to comprehend that later on, enables my score to be a 6. Because I would have liked to have a better example or explanation as to the constant back and forth of all of that. I feel like they could have extended the answer a little bit better. Like when the mom just says he's angry, deal with it. He doesn't like things being out of his control. There could have been a little bit more elaboration, in my opinion.
Everything was like so many questions.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Kept being posed without any answers to tie them up.
Visual answers I'm cool with, but
which when you get to the end of the movie, there are questions like left unanswered.
Absolutely.
That when you watch it again, you're like, wait, did they ever actually address that? Or why did
Right.
Like, oh, they never bring up the lambs again in the movie. I wonder why that was
Right.
such a big deal.
Right, right. They
Like,
focused on really strange spots and
right.
arguments and
So it's like they purposely want you to ask questions about things they'll never answer.
right, right. All overall though, extremely creative and extremely thought-provoking. I
Yes.
enjoyed that entire process. Even though I was going through it mentally, I
It was
enjoyed it.
intense for me. Like I said, I watched it in 3 different like sit downs because
Right.
it's just intense
It
movie.
is very intense. All the while a toddler running around making a bunch of noise. Oh, oh, rough, but good overall.
All right.
Okay. Are we moving on to
Now,
Click?
my I'm so excited. I am so excited for this clip.
I'm so glad. That makes me happy.
I bought it yesterday or 2 days ago,
And you were able to play through it all, right?
and I played through it. Oh god,
Yes.
I played through it.
It's
Go ahead.
a very quick click to play through.
A quick click.
So
Yes.
this week's click is To the Moon. It's an RPG game, and it is 16-bit, so not the most visually pleasing game, but also I'd say easily one of the best short story games I've played ever. Very
It
unique.
was it was so gorgeous
Yes.
in its storytelling that it
Yes.
was like visually you
Exactly.
didn't need it to be more than
Exactly.
what it was.
Lots of plenty of dialogue to give you the image that you need from that 16-bit game. So you start out understanding that the main I want to say the main player or character of the game is part of Sigmund Corp, and it's a technology based job where they go and create artificial memories for people. It's like a wish for fulfillment for people who are on their deathbed who don't have much time to live, but they go and basically make this person's artificial wish come true.
Right. What I want to say
Yeah.
really quick is that what's interesting is that this reminded me so much of Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, which I don't know if you've seen that movie,
I
but
haven't, but I've
it's
heard.
about a corporation like this, a business where they go in while you're sleeping and they erase parts of your memory.
Oh, interesting.
So
So they
it's not
erase it.
right. So it's a little bit
Oh.
different because in this game you're changing it and you're manufacturing memories, but but it's the same kind of where they go in and they put this thing on him, which is a Charlie Kaufman movie who is the same director.
Oh my, we couldn't have
So
picked.
as I was playing this game, I was like, should I have just picked Eternal Sunshine? 'Cause, like, wow.
Wow, that's something I'm that's interesting. I'm gonna have to watch that movie actually.
But so anyway, so part of Sigmund Corp.
Yeah, so Sigmund Corp, they're just that job that go around and they create those artificial memories to fulfill those wishes. They do get a call. It's Dr. Eva and Dr. Neil Watts, who are the two employers assigned to Johnny Wiles's case. And basically all they know about the job is that he wants to go to the moon. And Johnny doesn't know why. He doesn't know why he wants to go to the moon. So that was basically their job. They go in and they're trying to figure that out, all the while creating his wish. A little bit rough, I would say, trying to pull at scraps for that. It's the whole premise of the game is you're going through his memories to find out why and when that wish started. Johnny also, so when they arrive to the house, which took some traversing to get there, they arrive to what I would consider a mansion for a 16-bit
Right.
game. They're
Right.
greeted.
It looks like wealthy.
Right, right. Well, very big house. They're immediately greeted with two kids, one playing the piano and another boy just off doing his thing. But there's also a caretaker for Johnny, who he, in short, hired to make sure everything else in the house goes okay and that he's okay and that he fulfills his wish. Johnny did have a childhood sweetheart who he married, and her name is River. And that I
I
know.
cried for like an hour and a half while I was
It
playing this game.
it tugged really hard at the heartstrings because as even like I'm a sucker again for those kind of storylines. It's just it's something I find fascinating. But again, elderly people have a
Right.
hold on me. So you start off by trying to traverse his mind, which is a little hard because he is comatose when they meet him. So they have to be very careful when they jump in time to go and try to find his memories. So they do a little bit of scavenging around the house to go and look around and see what they could find. All the while, they find small bits and pieces that kind of help bring in a memory. And once they conglomerate enough of those mementos, they start a memory. And I can't remember the first memory. Oh gosh, what was it? Doctors gain access to the earliest childhood memories. So the childhood memories start first. Is that correct?
No, it's so they start going backwards in time. So the first memory that they see is him like on the bridge by the lighthouse, and it's Lily there. And so they go up to him and they start explaining to him where they're
Oh, what they're
from.
doing there.
And he goes, "Oh, I was just going to call you." And they're like, "Actually, you already have."
That's right. That's right. And do you see the lighthouse at that time? I can't recall.
You can see the lighthouse like in the distance.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So seeing him for the first time, they didn't get enough information. He also was pretty taken aback by them and just basically said, "Get me to the moon or else." And
He was like, "I don't know why I want to go. I just want to go."
right, right. I'll go, I guess, in order, but yes, you do play the game backwards all the way to the childhood memories, trying to piece all of the things together. So it does leave so much suspense and so many questions until you're able to get to the end, which in my opinion, my favorite way to play a game or read a book. I've I can't tell you how many book series and TV shows that I've watched out of order for that same reason. It's weird, but I love it.
To watch the end first.
Yeah,
And
not
then you go forward.
right. Not even the end too. Like I'll even start in the middle, and I will because there's so much more fun in that to me.
There is something interesting. I don't do that all the time, but I do remember there are certain shows where you hop in the middle and then somehow you get hooked.
Yes.
And then you go back to the beginning and you watch it and you already know what's going to happen.
Yes.
Which is interesting.
And then you don't know the ending.
Yeah, because you're waiting to see how they get there, but
Right.
then you keep going. So that's happened a few times. I usually start shows from the beginning because that's...
Yeah, shows definitely. Books are a little bit different, but...
Oh, really? Oh, you'll just pick up and...
do it. Honestly, it's so
Dangerous.
interesting. I know, right? Live on the wild side.
Anyways, so he's...
So
Wait, where were we in the game?
yeah, so they for story's sake, I'm just gonna go with his childhood memories up, if you will.
Yeah.
And touch on the major points. But the doctors through rigorous training reach all the way back to his childhood memories where he first met River. And they met at a carnival, and Johnny's mom was there as
They
well,
were,
obviously.
how old were they?
I
Like
want to say they were
kindergarten?
5.
Okay, that's probably what I was like.
They don't say, I don't think.
They don't say, but he looks so young that I want to say like 5 to 7. Like,
Easily, right? Yeah.
because I don't think they even go to school together yet.
No, you're
Which
right.
would have to be like what, preschool even?
Maybe. Yeah,
So maybe 4.
maybe. Because they were, yeah, they weren't in school, you're right, at all.
Right. But old enough to just play on the playground and
Yeah,
like
yeah.
wander around. They're not babies.
I will say, too, before you get to his childhood memories and the process of going backwards, you do find out a lot of like small hints towards the lighthouse, small hints towards,
Right. You learn the whole story going backwards.
yeah, see their wedding, and you see bar meets with their friends and stuff like that, which again, really interesting timeline. And it's as they're kids at this carnival, they kind of meander off, yeah, like you said, into a playground, like where they're by themselves. But they look up at the night sky and see a constellation. And it is a rabbit with a moon as its belly. Again, 16-bit has nothing on just the dialogue explaining it. It's really beautiful.
Right.
And in order for them to unlock those memories, they had the doctors had to find a bunch of origami, different colored bunny rabbits.
Yes.
And so that detail in the beginning, you're like, why is River, because they're going through the house, River was obsessed. They find out that she was just making origami bunnies.
Right.
And they didn't know why, but they picked one up to create a memory, a memento. And so the kids mutually agree to meet at that same place the following year, promising that if they forget or get lost, the two would regroup on the moon, because again, they were kind of separated from the carnival.
Right.
But in order to regroup together to meet each other, they said, well, if you can't find each other, go to the moon. So that's where the wish starts
Right.
after they reach that childhood memory.
So the thing is that we can't get to this memory though on our first try
Not at all. Not at all.
because he had a traumatic experience right after,
He did.
and so then it blocked off this memory, which made it impossible for the doctors to get to this memory, which is why they couldn't figure out why he wanted to go to the moon.
Right. And so what would happen is when they would enter his memory, or enter his brain, I should say, they would hit this static wall and wouldn't be able to forgo it. And if they did, in if you can imagine, the plane of existence, if you will, of the memory was blocked and fallen apart, and it was staticky and you couldn't get to it. But they couldn't traverse that without there being something seriously to go wrong, either to Johnny or them. So they did have to, I forgot what initialized the progression to find out that memory. Like, I forgot what memory or memento triggered it for them to be able to see what happened. I think it was the platypus? I can't recall.
So what happened is they couldn't figure it out, so they left his memories and they called like their corporation again to look at his medical records, and then they found out that he
Medical
had been on beta blockers.
That's right. Okay.
And then they had to go through a different way to get to access those memories that were being blocked.
Got it. Okay. So basically what it was explaining was that After they access that memory through what they figured out were beta blockers, preventing him from remembering anything in that section of his life.
Mm-hmm.
They were able to understand that Johnny and Joey, they were both hanging out outside their home when a car tragically killed his twin brother Joey.
Mm-hmm.
And his mother instinctively, which I understand from the mother's perspective, but this is the worst thing you could do to anybody. Like, if anything, like, the mother should have taken beta blockers. You know what I'm saying? It's just so traumatic. Like,
She put her kid on meds and she didn't get any help and totally went crazy
yeah, just like, she,
and ended up calling John Joey his whole life.
right, right. Which, thank God he didn't remember because that would have been even worse, too. But
Yeah.
horrible, horrible accident. Like, I couldn't even. I cried a lot right there because the mom just like losing it over all of that
Mm-hmm.
and then doing what she did to him. I was like, and at that point you had been playing for at least a couple of hours now, so learning all of that up until that point,
Right.
oh, heavy. And so they were able to understand he had the twin brother who was killed in the accident. But the beta blockers also prevented him from remembering the first encounter he had with River. Totally.
Mm-hmm.
So he didn't
Because
remember
they
they went to the
happened
carnival. Right.
right at the same time.
Right. So he didn't remember
The rabbit,
the
the
rabbit, the
moon.
promise, for the most part. And they they end up meeting again, him and River, Johnny and River end up meeting again in high school. But she was kind of depicted as the loner girl, the strange girl, quiet. And in the bar scene that you find along, going backwards of his memories, him and River and a couple friend of theirs meet at a bar, and they do explain in that situation that Johnny and his friend are talking, and he's talking about River and her progression in her disease. So he Johnny, as they meet in high school, he grows very fond of River. He's very drawn to her. They do end up getting married, like I mentioned before, and River ends up realizing that Johnny forgot the memory of the carnival. Okay, so here's where I'm getting to what the syndrome was. So
Mm-hmm.
what her like social syndrome was. After Johnny confessed that he approached her in school because she was different, and that he thought that that was their first meeting. So he's explaining to River like, no, I met you in
Oh.
school. This is our first meeting. Basically what I've read upon it is that River is strongly implied to have Asperger's syndrome.
Hmm.
So, which makes sense. In a way, it does. It does make sense.
I feel like that term, though, is not what it's called anymore.
I'm not sure. I don't know.
I think that that term is named after a doctor who was like a Nazi. And so they don't
Stop.
call it Asperger's anymore.
Oh my
I
god,
think
I
they
didn't know
just
that.
call it autism now. I think it's just on the autism spectrum now.
If that's the
But again,
case,
I'm not the expert. But I do know for sure that I don't think that that's what the term is anymore.
interesting. Okay. Well, I would like to do more research on that and know for sure so I don't, you know,
So
quote
she
that.
probably.
Probably did have autism, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So because she does have this because she is on the spectrum, let's just say that. she does not tell Johnny directly about their first meeting at all. Instead, what she does is create the rabbit origami and color coordinate them for the moon being the yellow one, and and all of these minuscule hints that you don't catch in the very beginning.
Right, you're just wondering what is the significance of the bunnies.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I mean, obviously, you find out
That
going
it's
back
her
to
way of just wanting to be understood
right, and
and
she
wanting to
couldn't.
be remembered.
Yeah, and she couldn't explain it to him because of her syndrome on her spectrum. She couldn't physically explain it to him, so her aggressive way of going about it was just creating a bunch of bunnies to remind him. And she had no idea what actually happened to him because he didn't even know.
Right.
And she also tried cutting her hair.
Like when she was a kid.
Yeah, to like spark that memory for him, so he would remember their kid meeting. And she would constantly wear blue and yellow dress to remind him of their wedding. She was obviously she was unable to make Johnny remember that going to the
Right.
moon was because of their first meeting. Like, we'll meet there when we die. We'll go there together.
Right.
She couldn't spark him, which was terrible. And so she ended up passing away. And that's when Johnny just had this inexplicable desire to get to the moon. I forgot what kept it planted though. Because didn't she say something on their wedding night? Because they went to the lighthouse.
So that they could look up and keep watching over the lighthouse from the moon.
Because she thought the stars in the sky were lighthouses.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. Oh, God, this game
I'm gonna cry again.
This game is so good. I know I'm telling it like probably the worst way I could tell it, but oh.
You're telling the story, but I feel like it's okay because when people play it,
Yeah.
they'll get to experience it in a real way.
Yeah.
Like you're not spoiling the story, like the feeling of the story when you go through it because you're not explaining it in the same order.
Right, right. Yeah, it's also easier to tell that way too. That's for sure.
But I feel like if you could still go back and play it, like knowing what happens in the story and just like
and still be in awe.
Right.
For sure. So
just of how it's told.
Right. So with that information to the doctors, once they were finally able to get to his childhood memory, and also get past the beta blockers, they were finally able to try and conform a plan to be able to basically reroute Johnny's life to be able to get to the moon ultimately. And
Right.
Rosaline and Watt's idea of implanting the memory involved Joey not getting killed. So in Johnny's life, Joey didn't die. And in that alternate universe, Joey became a popular author, and Joey did not meet River again until they started working at NASA. And that was a constant concern of who was it? Was it Rosaline?
Mm-hmm.
Rosaline was so torn that Johnny wouldn't meet River again, or that she would die. I forget.
So basically, in order for him to keep his desire to go to the moon, there is a cut sequence of them like going through each memory trying to get him to be interested in going to the moon. And
that's right.
No, I'm not. I don't really want to go to the moon.
But
yeah. So they're like, we really need to get him to want to go to the moon.
Right.
And so they go back, and the only way they can do that, since they agree that they're going to meet again on the moon if they don't see each other, is to make it so they don't see each other. So he doesn't get to meet River. So he has to go.
That's
And then he
right.
gets this idea that he will meet her on the moon.
That's
And even
right.
though that's not the motivation, like to meet this girl on the moon the whole time, that's what starts it. And so since
Yeah.
he doesn't go back and meet her again, he keeps this idea of wanting to go to the moon.
Right. Thank you for clarifying that, because
Yeah.
that was that was also hard for me too, just like knowing that he cared for her so much, and that was the whole premise of the game, was just to get him to
Like,
the moon to reunite. But oh, River was such a good character in my opinion. Not the typical, woe is me kind of character. It was very much a unique and interesting NPC that you felt for.
yeah.
There was no part of her storyline that you questioned or worried about or didn't like. It was all very
Right.
well told.
Now, John, on the other hand, I feel like with similar character traits as Jake in I'm thinking of Ending Things,
Uh-huh.
they both have this idea of like a girl and like who they want their girlfriend to be, and it's this kind of like Jake in the movie, it's obviously in his head because he is making her up in his head, so it is this ideal girl that he's made up.
Right. Right.
But the scary thing about John is that it's not a girl. This is a real girl, and he has this idea of her and is like, oh, she's so different. She's gonna make my life different and blah blah blah. Manic
Right.
pixie dream girl, like toxic syndrome.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah,
And
exactly.
he he assigns this thing for her, and she doesn't know how to communicate with him, like like her needs
Right.
and like what she wants him to remember.
Right.
And he will lie to her to make her to like manipulate situations, make
Yep.
her think and feel certain ways, and she can like see through it sometimes. But
Right, right.
the fact that this is like their marriage, you know what I mean? And like
Yeah.
I just don't think that I feel like both men are just kind of self-centered and like
Hell bent on their own
right, like they're like
obligations.
the rules are different for them, and like everyone else should be worried about their life, you know what I mean?
Right, right.
And like kind of their idea of a partner is just like
Somebody who benefits them.
you're not seeing another person as a human being, you're just
Right.
seeing an image of what you create to
Yep.
fit in your life of what you want, but no one is that. That's not what partnership is.
Right.
That's if you want to buy a thing, you just buy a thing. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right. It's a very interesting perspective I mean, it's strange because I played the game before I watched the movie. So having that comparison is really interesting because you're hell bent on getting Johnny to the moon and
Right.
and reuniting.
And Johnny explains that to his friend. He's like, I
Oh,
want
that's
her
right.
in my life because she's so different, and she'll make me different. I won't be like a normal, like typical guy.
Right.
And
Right.
his friend's like, so you only want her because of what she can bring to you, not because of who she is.
Yep. Yep.
And he
Oh.
goes back and tells River that, and that's when she starts making the rabbits, and he thinks that that's why she's upset, was that because he originally only wanted to talk to her because she was different. But
Yeah.
that's not why she was upset. It was because he didn't remember the first time they really
Right.
talked.
Oh. Oh. My brain is just flooded with it. Oh my gosh. Just thinking about it. Ay, ay, ay. The rabbits. I want to make an origami rabbit now.
I know, me too. I actually was like, oh, should I get an origami rabbit tattoo? And I was like, oh gosh, I've only been playing this game for 2 hours. I'm like, and it's gonna be over. Like, this game is gonna have such a small
climactic ending.
But it was so like powerful
It
emotionally in
is.
the moment that I was like, wow, this is so, it was very like impactful for sure.
I agree.
For sure.
I did not know what I was getting into when I played the game, and after I was like, I'm so glad I did because it's so good. But
Yeah.
ultimately, when he meets River at NASA, and they're both sharing the same urge to get to the moon, dying Johnny is actually starting to die. He's starting to go. And he imagines going on a moon mission with River. And so the doctors are aware of this, because they can feel and sense and see that Johnny's life is fading. And once it reaches to their mission point, Johnny and River board the ship, and they're getting ready to launch. And as they do, River holds out her hand to him, and the moon appears through the window of the ship, and Johnny takes her hand, and then he starts to flatline, basically. And the doctors realize that they've now accomplished what they were sought out to do.
And in the new memory, it goes back and shows, well, first, like the freaking saddest thing is that the first thing that happens is they have to go back through all the memories, and that they remove River from them.
Oh, that's right.
And then they add the brother, so it's so heart-wrenching because you're losing River, but then he's getting these memories with his brother that he never had.
Oh,
he never got to
God.
grow up with his brother, and it's just like, your heart can't take it.
I know. And you know what? Like, I did not, I can definitely say I did not see it coming that he had a twin brother, except for like a few hints here and there, right? But
Right. You don't realize that it's a bunk bed. Or
No.
that it matters that it's a bunk bed when you're going through the bedroom.
right, right.
But then after they redo the memories, and then
Yeah.
she comes back to NASA and they meet, then there are all these new memories of them
Yeah.
now getting married and growing old and building the house together.
Yeah, Joey was a
And
part of Johnny's wedding.
in the real world, they couldn't afford her medical bills and the house.
Right.
But then they can go back and they redo all his memories so that now they could afford
Right.
the house, and she didn't get sick, and so they both got to live on the cliff with the lighthouse. And and it's like, oh, there was a quote I wrote down,
Oh.
and it says, "The ending isn't any more important than any of the moments leading to it." And I feel like that is just the thesis of this game
And movie.
and movie
And movie.
and this episode of our podcast. But I feel like, especially because this game, how it shows you the memories and how it like, first you're going backwards, then you go forward again, deleting and replacing.
Yep.
And then you're just making brand new memories for him. And really, at the end of the day, his brother did die when he was
Yeah.
like 5.
Yeah. The reality of
And
it sets back in.
River really did get sick and really never did live with him in that house. And they really never went to the moon.
I know.
But all of his memories that he's leaving this world with, the life that he's leaving with, that's what happened.
Yep. Yeah.
And it's like, the ending isn't any more important than what's happening. Everything leading up to it, because it's all the same.
Yeah. And yeah, he wouldn't know any better. There's no way for him to know any better, which I found such I don't know, I found such comfort in. Because
Right.
when you're listening to somebody recall a story that you were a part of, and you hear things and like
Mm-hmm.
experience things that they say that you're like, did that really
Yes.
happen? Like
Yes. I
it's
feel
all
like
your
especially
perception.
when you're a kid and like
Hmm.
hearing memories from like your siblings,
Yep. Yep.
like, oh, you did this when you were a kid. I'm
Yep.
like, I did what?
Right, exactly. And you're like, that's your perspective. This is
Right.
mine.
You're like, I remember the whole situation differently.
Right.
So when John is dying at the end, even though none of those memories are real, does it really matter?
Nope. Nope. And I mean, ultimately, he doesn't even recall, he's not even able to recall the actual memory of them setting the promise to get to the moon, per se. It's
Mm-hmm.
really just that he ends with River.
And it's just a happy life.
Yeah, yeah. And
Mm-hmm.
it's a crazy thing to consider as well, just because of
If you can change all your memories on your deathbed
I
so that you can die happy,
know. Right, right.
I would pay for that too.
Right, I would too, honestly. But I there's also the discrepancy of like, well, why didn't you save your little? Oh no, because he didn't know. But in my brain, I was like, why didn't you save your little brother? But I get it.
Oh, well, he.
He had the beta blockers, but
Hmm.
just strange. It's just like a strange mind mind puzzle that it's these kind of games and movies that have me messed up for the next week and a half, just
Mm-hmm.
contemplating life
Just like
genuinely.
thinking about what is even real.
Yeah.
Like for me, I'm like, I drove to the post office today. Like, that's meaningless.
Right? Or you're
What is
like,
it all? What's the point?
and even to go as far as saying, like, did I even go to the post office? It's
I
weird.
know.
Your mind is so powerful in that sense that
Mm-hmm.
that you're a few decisions away from changing your life, or you're a few decisions away from making a horrible mistake or whatever it is. And it's
Right. Mm-hmm.
ultimate. I'm gonna give this game, this click, an 8 out of 10 clicks, because it was such a good story based game, all the while still being
Mm-hmm.
interactive,
Mm-hmm.
still, making you think through puzzles and think through things.
Yeah.
And the setup of the story, the storyline, it was perfect.
Mm-hmm.
I only gave it 8 because of the graphics. And again, your
Yeah.
your brain is powerful enough to
It's
connect the
okay.
two and make
Yeah.
it more beautiful than what it looks like, but could you imagine a game with full graphics to that extent? I
Hmm.
just I'm a sucker. I like it.
Yeah.
I said that
Okay,
a lot.
so I'm gonna give it an 8 also. And for me, it's just losing 2 points on obviously graphics and just because it's short.
Very short.
But like this storyline and how deep it goes and everything, it's just so intricate and beautiful.
Mhm.
And what I want to say about storytelling is that you can tell a good story and make someone feel good,
Mhm.
and you can tell a good story and make someone feel uncomfortable and stressed out the whole time.
Mhm. Mhm. And it still be good
and
to.
I and it's still good and it's well done,
Mhm.
but I think that if you're able to do it good and do it well done and there are positive emotions that can be gained from it,
Uh-huh.
I feel like that should be the ideal.
I agree, whether that be a bad situation in the story or not.
Mm-hmm.
Like Because this one is
So,
hypothetical, the game is hypothetical as far as his memories go. It
uh-huh.
didn't really happen in real life. It's
But
still good.
it's a happy ending too, you
Exactly.
know? And
Exactly.
it's making you feel, this game just does it makes you feel good even though you're crying and sad. There's so many happy tears because even it's beautiful. It's
It
like
is.
the tears come because you're like overwhelmed with beauty.
Right.
Whereas
Right.
in the movie you're so overwhelmed, but it's
Mm-hmm.
not with beauty and you're not crying. You're just kind of getting more and more uncomfortable
Yeah. Yeah.
and like drawn it, like, not to say that it's not done well. And as far as storytelling goes, they both kind of approached it
Similarly.
similarly.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Mm-hmm. Interestingly.
Mm-hmm. I know. I can't believe we paired these two.
But they make you feel so different. I know. I know they did kind of go together in a weird way as I was watching the movie and playing the game. Because I didn't watch the movie all at once.
Mm-hmm.
So I would play a little bit of the game, watch a little bit of the movie, play a little bit of the game, watch it. And I'm like,
Oh, that
these
must have
are...
been crazy.
It was a little bit much, but ooh, it was good. It was worth it.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, my friend, we've been recording for 2 hours now.
Yes.
I believe that's enough for anyone to listen to.
Yes, two very good clicks and flicks. Click and flick is a very good selection we had.
Yes.
But thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening. Thanks for, if you made it this far.
Yes.
Congratulations. Achievement unlocked.
It's a feat, yes. You get a trophy.
Okay. Good night.
Good night. Hey folks, thanks for listening and sticking around.
If you enjoyed what you heard, subscribe and follow for some more Click and Flick content.
If you'd like to hear us talk about your favorite movies and video games, you can send us your suggestions to clickandflickpodcast@gmail.com.
That's click, A-N-D, flick, podcast@gmail.com.
We can't wait to hear from you guys.
Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.